The Catholic channel Sirius XM 129 presents Sounds from the Spires with Dr. Jennifer Pascual, Music Director of St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Hello and welcome to Sounds from the Spires. This is Dr. Jennifer Pascual and you're listening to the Catholic channel on Sirius XM 129. And today I have a very special guest, Father Ricky Manalo. And he is a Paulist priest who resides in San Francisco at St. Mary's out there. And he is a musician, a priest, dear friend, fellow Pinoy, wonderful scholar, and just a great person. And I'm happy to know him and call him friend. Good morning, Father Ricky.
Good morning, Jennifer. How are you?
Good. How are you? Kumusta ka po?
Doing well. And you guys, I guess it's a bit colder here in San Francisco. It's in the 50s, it seems, but we're doing well.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. It's been a really long time, I think, since you've been on, at least a few years, and it was great to run. Yeah, it was great to run into you at NPM, National Association of Pastoral Musicians, just a month or two ago.
Yeah, it was good to see you, as always. Having both of us served in the board of NPM, it's always good to see fellow board members. We're past board members now.
That's right, yeah. And one of them is our president now, so Steve Petronak.
That's right. It was great. It's good to see him. Yeah. Steve Petronak. He's doing a great job with the association.
Yeah.
God bless him.
You're originally from the East Coast, right, Ricky?
I am. Believe it or not, you might not pick it up, but I was actually born in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
In the Crown Heights neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
But and my parents moved kind of everywhere every other year for the first 5-6 years of my life. Mm-hmm. From Queens, they lived in Elmhurst, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and then we went across the river. Elizabeth, Perth Amboy, was settled in Monmouth County, Marlborough, New Jersey. It's really where I grew up.
Uh-huh. And how did you end up in San Francisco, the other end of the country?
Boy, well, I've been in religious life for a while now. So, I think I lived in 13 cities in my life. But I came to the Bay Area close to 18 years. No, close to, oh, dear God, I have to think. 2005. So it's been like 13 years, primarily to study, begin my doctoral studies in Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union back in 2005.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So that's why I chose to live here in San Francisco, primarily because we have Old St. Mary's Cathedral is right here in Chinatown, mm-hmm. and I'm very, very much engaged in the Asian Pacific Catholic dialogue, mm-hmm. context, and all of that. So
that's right, and you have Chinese blood in you too, as well as Filipino, right?
I do. My grandfather was from the Fukien region in China, and so he was Fukienese, and in fact, there were 6 Manalo kids, and I tend to come after my grandfather the most. I think out of all my other siblings. Mm-hmm. But I would be a quarter Chinese, but I certainly got his height, and a lot of other of his cultural sensibilities.
Right, yeah. And you're a Paulist Father. Why did you choose this order of religious life?
Well, they are a wonderful, vibrant community. They focus on how do we evangelize and preach the gospel, but do it in different ways, do it in different expressions, new forms. And so I found their charism very appealing, mm-hmm. To be able to dialogue with them and my own particular ministerial gifts in liturgy and in music. They've just been very supportive and a very dynamic group right there in not so far away from you, Columbus Circle, New York, is the mother church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. And, you're always going around the world and teaching and preaching and sharing your music and your faith. And it's just wonderful that you're able to share that with everybody. And it's a gift to all of us.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I've been really enjoying all that traveling. It's, although it kind of wears at you after a while. Like, you've been traveling too a lot.
Yeah.
But it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. So you travel with your music and your faith. When did you get started in music itself?
Boy, so once we settled in New Jersey, in Marlborough, New Jersey, I was 6 years old, and it was very common, as it still is, for music to be a part of a Filipino household. Mm-hmm. And so once we got settled, all of us began to learn to learn the piano.
Yeah.
You know, so I began to play the piano, at least take lessons when I was 6. But even stories of me always playing the piano back when I was 3 years old. So it was always a very musical household. My father would always pretend he knew how to play the piano, I should say, but he had a very good ear and a passion for Beethoven. He was also hard of hearing, so he would blast out the stereo, all the great classical music. Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, he would blast it out. And so you could imagine it was a very noisy house with 6 children practicing the piano, my father blasting out the music, you know. And if you weren't practicing the piano, you were doing other things around the house.
Yeah.
And my mother also had a wonderful musical sensibility within her as well. She still does. And so it was just a very musical household, and I guess learning all of that.
Yeah.
I began to take lessons when I was in high school. I began to take lessons at the Mannes College of Music Preparatory Division.
Yes.
And so I got to just commute, you know, in for that, since I lived right across the river in New Jersey. And then I eventually got my bachelor's of music in composition at the Manhattan School of Music. Mm-hmm. Back in the 80s.
In the 80s. When did you write your first piece of liturgical music, Father Ricky?
That's a great question. So when I first joined the seminary, I actually joined the Conventual Franciscans. They're a pre-theology philosophy program. And it was right after I graduated from Manhattan School of Music. I entered right into my discernment of becoming a priest and a religious came maybe about a year and a half before I graduated from Manhattan School. So when I was, during that first year already, I was trying to see how I might be able to transition from my classical music training into liturgical music. So that's back in 1987. I began to just tinker that. But I didn't really pursue publication until the early 90s.
And now you have all these wonderful masses and pieces of music and recordings out and sharing it with the world. So that's great. And we're all singing it in churches.
That's nice to know.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And you and OCP shared with me your latest, which is Be Still and Know I'm Here, along with your Mass of Christ, the Inner Light. What was your inspiration behind that song and that Mass setting? And this recording, really.
Yeah, I think that the whole recording itself is focused on more meditative, quiet music per se. Even the Mass setting, the Mass of Christ, the Inner Light, uses an East Asian pentatonic scale. So there were a few things. I wanted to present or compose a Mass setting that might be more quiet, even though this could still be done in a festive way. But something maybe more quiet, might be more conducive for Lent or Advent, for example. But then also, compose a Mass setting that uses that East Asian pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale, found in many indigenous cultures and throughout Asia as well. And then also Be Still and Know I'm Here, which is the title of that whole collection. That was done during a keynote address that I gave at the Mid-Atlantic Congress, and I want to, out of a lot of great dialoguing I had with the committee for that keynote, led to the creation of that song, which is a very the text talks about ultimately how do we kind of abandon all but who we are to the mystery of God, and really our encountering I guess like in liturgy, anything we do is ultimately some kind of an encountering that we experience with the living God before us. So the text kind of talks about that and points us towards that surrendering of our own lives to the deeper mystery of God.
Yeah, thank you for that great explanation.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and so our guest today is Ricky Manalo, Father Ricky Manalo, a Paulist priest, and also musician, and we're going to listen now to his song, Be Still and Know I'm Here.
I am the one who comes to you and calls you each by name. In your mother's womb I knitted you, so your being I do claim. My presence is my gift to you, surrender all control. In the presence of my spirit I shall breathe into your soul. In this encounter we begin. Be still and breathe me in. You must surrender to draw near. Be still and know I'm here. Be still and know I'm here. In ancient times I called to you through prophets great and small. They responded to my sacred voice, they responded to my call. And then one day I came to you, both human and divine, the Savior of the universe, now in sacred bread and wine. In this encounter we begin. Be still and breathe me in. You must surrender to draw near. Be still and know I'm here. Be still and know I'm here. And now you shall encounter me through faces of the poor. As you look into their eyes of hope, may all justice be restored. So blessed are the pure of heart, the mourners and the
And that's Be Still and Know I'm Here by our guest today, Father Ricky Manalo. And that's on the recording, Be Still Be Still and Know I'm Here, along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light. And that's available through ocp.org, OregonCatholicPress.org. Beautiful song, Ricky.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And when you compose something like this, do you think of the text first or the music first, or they go hand in hand? How does that work for you in your mind?
It really varies in the end. I always say there are three elements: text, tune, and theology.
Mm-hmm.
And or theology. Sometimes with me, because I tend to be a thinker, theology and context comes first. I pretty much imagine what is the context in my head. What event am I imagining? Is this song going to be sung in what particular season? Is it for communion time? Who are the instrumentalists? All of those things. And when I piece all of those images together in my mind, all the five senses come to life. I begin to see what that might look like. I begin to smell if there's incense. I begin to see, what's going. What are the acoustics? And ultimately, within all those five senses, I also hear music.
Mm-hmm.
So the music just comes right to me because, if I could imagine anything, I could also imagine musical sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But usually the theology context comes first, and then I usually play at the actual piano, and once I have that context and that theology in mind, the melody usually comes first, at least before the actual text.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all interchanging because sometimes by getting the theology and the context, I already have some working text already in mind.
Right.
So it's really an interplay and all of that. But in the end, to me, the melody and the music has to be in place because I could always tweak the words
Uh-huh.
to conform to the melody. But if people cannot sing it, then in my mind, then there's really no point.
Mm-hmm.
But then this is interchange. If the theology of the text is not really appropriate or correct, all of that, well, that's not going to work either.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, I still lean towards the music because I know my theology. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. Yes, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah.
And ideally, what season and in what context would you use this song, Be Still and Know I'm Here?
I think, I could see that certainly for, different contexts of for Lent,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, with the prayerfulness of it, for retreat moments, for anything where if there's any kind of talk about abandonment, about, our relationship with God, and how that affects our relationship with one another.
Mm-hmm.
But I primarily see it during those more introspective liturgical context. Think about like "Here I Am, Lord," what Dan Schutte has written.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the same idea. How do we bring in those more reflective, interpersonal reflections on liturgy
Mm-hmm.
and our relationship with God and one another?
Yeah. And the recording is on OCP. Is the score also available for people if they're interested?
Oh yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like with all collections, actually the music usually comes first.
Okay.
Then we do the recording. So, yeah, but the whole collection is available as well.
Okay, great. And all the beautiful instrument parts as well?
That's right. Yeah, I
great.
usually try to score things with SATB or C instruments. In this case, it was just one flute, but that could be done with any C instrument.
Sure. Yeah, so go to ocp.org if you're interested in the recording and the score. It's Be Still and Know I'm Here, and also along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light, of which we're going to listen to parts of that when we come back from break. And we're talking to Father Ricky Manalo here on Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel, Sirius XM 129. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Hallelujah. Your servant is listening. You have the words of everlasting life.
And that is the Alleluia from Mass of Christ the Inner Light. And that was written by our guest today, Father Ricky Manalo. And you can get that recording, Be Still and Know I'm Here, and Mass of Christ the Inner Light at ocp.org, OregonCatholicPress.org, the recording and the score. And very singable. And Father Ricky mentioned that the whole Mass is based on a pentatonic scale. And for non-musicians, the pentatonic scale, if you go to a keyboard and you play all the black notes, that's your pentatonic scale. So that's what that sounds like. So, yeah, great. And it's very memorable so that people can sing it. It's singable, which is a test of a true and good piece of music to sing at Mass, if people can get that in their heads and remember it.
Yeah.
And yeah. The people who are on the recording, I downloaded this, so I didn't quite get the information. Are those people that you selected yourself, or did OCP select them for you?
It's sort of both.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we record all of my collections are recorded up in Portland, Oregon, in the studio there, Anselma's studio, and so they obviously have a roster of singers and musicians whom they use all the time. But then they also go through that list with me, particularly when it comes to soloists, you know, and we get to, we sometimes, I might hear a demo of a particular singer and try to translate it into my own song, per se, or after having been now with OCP for 20 years, sometimes I know particular singers, you know, whose voice I really like.
Sure.
So it's really a nice dialogue that I have with them.
Yeah, that's great. And, well, before we keep talking, let's listen to one more. This is the Glory to God from the same Mass, Mass of Christ the Inner Light.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will. We praise you, we bless you, we adore.
And that is the Glory to God from Mass of Christ the Inner Light by our guest today, Father Ricky Manalo. And that is available at ocp.org, OregonCatholicPress.org. That's Be Still and Know I'm Here, along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light. Wonderful setting, Father Ricky.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and this year, just a month ago, was it a month ago or 2 months ago? No,
I don't know.
You were awarded and very deservingly so, the National Association of Pastoral Musicians Musician of the Year Award. Congratulations.
I know. Oh, thanks. I know. It's quite humbling. It's very humbling to be able to receive that award.
Yeah.
So I guess I have so much gratitude towards NPM and all the people who made that possible.
Right. It's so deserving. You're so deserving of that award. And, you've served the organization for many years, whether it's as a speaker or on committees or the national board or, just your presence, your persona there present at the conference every year. How long have you been a member of the organization?
Well, I don't know the exact year, but it's been since, I guess, the late 90s. Yeah, since I began to compose music, so probably the mid-90s. It must have been about 20 years now, 20-plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations. That's a wonderful honor. And I know that both of us have served on the board before. We sit there and deliberate and come up with names and who's the best person.
I remember.
And so
I know it's one of the best parts, right, of being a board member. So when I received this news, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
It's a process that it comes down to the board members in some ways, but but it's always very humbling.
Yeah, that's great. And when did you find out?
I think I found out about a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
From the former president, Monsignor Rick Hilgart.
Yes.
Called me. It was one of his last acts, I guess, as president. But he called me with the news. Yeah. And so it was neat to receive that. Yeah. I mean, the first thought that came to my mind was, I could think about a dozen other people who deserve this more than me, which doesn't mean I'm not grateful. I'm extremely grateful. But it was such an honor to receive that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're a wonderful musician and a wonderful scholar. I mean, I'm looking at your bio and your CV, and you have all these degrees from everywhere: theology and music, and Graduate Theological Union in Washington, and then California, Berkeley, and but you finished your doctorate a few years ago. What was your doctorate in? I mean, not your doctorate. Your doctoral thesis. What was your doctoral thesis?
My doctoral thesis focused on this parish here in San Francisco. I did an ethnographic study of a whole parish, but particularly about 8 to 10 people, and I wanted to kind of study their prayerful lives for about 2 years. I studied what do they do in everyday life, and how do they worship God through various liturgical rituals or prayer rituals. And it was, these 8 people were kind of representative of many across the demographic, categories. And but I pretty much wanted to interrelate their everyday worship practices from, let's say, praying the rosary or going for a walk, or going for a walk on the beach, or humming a tune in the car. All of those, interrelate all those practices with the Eucharist, with our Sunday Mass, and find out what emerges when we bring all of these interrelationships together. Like, if I sing a song, like as one example, it's Monday right now, and you've been playing a few of my songs, in this program. Well, how might that affect or influence a person's experience next week on Sunday, for example? And I came up with various categories and different correlations, what comes out of that, into this, what I call this larger liturgy of life. How all of us are called, not just on Sunday, but all of life, we're called to give praise to God each and every day. But it's part of this larger praise and worship we give to God in the end, because in the end, God is the source of all of who we are and of our being and all of our doing. So how do all of these interrelate towards our perfect worship towards God? Yeah. It was a fun ethnographic project, being able to be privileged to enter into the lives of these various people, understand their life stories, was a lot of work, especially when you do ethnographic work, and you have to transcribe the interviews down, which takes such a long time.
Yeah.
But then you come up with all this rich data. Sometimes when we read about liturgy, many times we limit ourselves to just the official documents, and of course they're very important. Sometimes even to begin with understanding what has been handed down to us, but at the same time, often in many studies we really don't actually then get these official documents and actually interrelate it with the everyday life, real experiences of people. So that was primarily my focus. Well, what happens when we take these documents on the liturgy? What do they say, and how do we, what happens in actual everyday life, and what comes out of that study?
Yeah. Were they the folks that you interviewed and observed all different age ranges?
Yeah, pretty much from like early 20s to 82 years old. It really varied, and people of different backgrounds, people of different ethnicities, cultures. We took even about a year, I guess, to even select and invite the different participants to be part of this project.
And were some of them different levels of faith, I guess? I can't think of the right words, but some of them more devout than others?
Absolutely, yeah. Like one of my participants was like an 82-year-old Filipino woman who if you go to her home, she has like 4 or 5 altars, shrines with all these devotional practices there, and she goes to Mass every day. Another 2 other subjects were like young adults. They might go to Mass maybe once every 3 months. But then they also might do other creative things with how they worship God, like through the use of their iPhone. Through social justice acts, or other areas like that. So it really varied, But there were some ways we can, there were some correlations we can do still. And what might that say about our experience of Sunday then, and worshiping God in the end?
That's really interesting. So we're talking about Father Ricky Manalo's doctoral thesis, and it's just talking about his every time he talks about ethnicity and ethno-culture and worship and theology, it's really fascinating. I know that you could talk about it for hours, but let's stop and listen to a piece of music, and then we'll continue talking to you about your life and your work. So this is now we're listening to "Turn Away from Sin," and this is on the recording "Be Still and Know I'm Here," along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light. And that's Lamb of God from Mass of Christ the Inner Light, written by our guest today, Father Ricky Manalo. And that is available at ocp.org, OregonCatholicPress.org. And that's on the recording Be Still and Know I'm Here, along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light. And Father Ricky was saying earlier that it has that Eastern flair to it. And you being of Eastern blood, Filipino and Chinese, and traveled all over the world, it's nice to hear your experience, your life experience in your music. And recently, this summer, you went to Africa. Please tell us all about that. That's really exciting.
Oh, yeah, that was my first time. I've been to Africa, and I was invited by the Jesuits. They have this gathering every other year called the Young Men's Society, and it's basically a gathering of Jesuit liturgical theologians, and every other year they choose a different city. Mm-hmm. So this time around they were going to Kenya, specifically Nairobi, and the focus was going to be on liturgy and popular religiosity and popular devotions. So they invited me to present to them on an Asian popular devotions, mm-hmm. and it gave me an opportunity, to not only meet this wonderful group of Jesuit theologians, but also to see Africa, to see, of course, all the different beautiful animals there, to meet the wonderful, so friendly people, mm-hmm. To absorb some of the beautiful cultural gifts that they bring to the world.
Yeah,
it was really a wonderful experience.
Right, I followed some of
and
some of your pictures on
giraffes.
Facebook. Oh, giraffes!
I got to see giraffes, which is always in my bucket list.
Oh, that's great.
So I have to do that again.
Yeah, definitely. And you hung out with the Jesuits, but were you able to spend a lot of time with the people at either just in their communities or at churches?
Yeah, well, the last one of the days, of course, was devoted to of doing some explorations, going around. The Jesuits themselves, they have a seminary theology there. They have a parish. Mm-hmm. So I was able to meet them. And, of course, during the conference itself were Jesuit seminarians from Nairobi and Uganda and all those. So I got to meet them that way. One evening they brought in a wonderful dancing troupe from Uganda. And I got to meet some of those people, and then, I guess the different people who work at the retreat center. Those are primarily my interactions, but it was primarily focused on the actual conference.
Right.
In some ways.
Is the seminary there blossoming with the local folks, and is mass attendance also great? You go to the Philippines and the churches are out the door. The attendance is usually overflowing. What's the attendance like there at mass, and what are the seminaries like?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be able to give you, not having spent extensive time there.
Yeah.
In Nairobi. But the Catholic faith is very much alive and strong there. Particularly with the devotions of the people. Their passion for the Catholic liturgies, the way that the Church allows them to express and worship in their own way, particularly through gestures and their sense of processions, dance, music, all of that. There's a wonderful enculturation going on. That allows them to worship God in their own cultural sensibilities and rituals and movements and all of that. And I love the music, of course. And in our closing mass, we brought in a wonderful choir that kind of led us in prayer and just mesmerized. I mean, we were processed from our retreat center through the grounds of the retreat center to the chapel, and these people had 30 plus Jesuits dancing.
Oh, wow.
Moving in procession. Something we're not really accustomed to as much here. Where we tend to have more worship from the head up.
Sure.
Per se. That's an exaggeration too, of course. But in general, they have a different approach to their bodies and how their bodies can be used as a way of worshiping God.
Yeah. Interesting. And And Father Ricky, you tend to be kind of a foodie. What was the food like there?
Well, I'm a foodie, and that's one of my favorite parts, of course. Whenever I travel anywhere, it's
Yeah.
about I have to hear the music and I have to eat the food.
Yes.
However, the food itself, we pretty much ate within the retreat center, and of course I loved it. The different vegetables I had not had before, the different carbs that they would do, some kind of roots and all of these, and the meats. Now, lately, I'm not a vegetarian, but I'm becoming less carnivorous. I still eat meat, particularly being Filipino. I can't avoid pork. But we, one of in our main sort of celebration dinner, we went out to a restaurant called Carnivore,
Mm-hmm.
and of course you can imagine what it was. It was like I don't know, 12 different types of animals that they served, and
Wow.
and I could not eat it. I could not eat most of it. So I guess passed. But but they had, but the guys who ate it, along with me, they actually loved it. Everything from ostrich meatballs to this animal to that animal. But it smelled wonderful. I just wish I was in the mood for eating all of that meat.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all those experiences, the dance, the music, and the food. I wish we could smell it and but whatnot. But that just sharing your stories with us. Thank you for that. Let's listen to just maybe a couple of minutes of Many and Great, and this is on the recording. Be Still and Know I'm Here with Mass of Christ the Inner Light, and our guest today is Father Ricky Manalo. I wish we had more time to listen to this lovely song, but you'll just have to buy the recording. It's Be Still and Know I'm Here and Mass of Christ the Inner Light, and we just listened to a little bit of Many and Great by our guest today, Father Ricky Manalo. Beautiful song, and I just hope that people are listening and they get in tune and get your recording, because it's really pretty. Yeah, and Father Ricky, what's next? Do you have another recording in progress?
Oh, I haven't. I kind of came out with 2 recordings and collections in the scope of 2 years. So I kind of wear 5 different hats, as far as my ministry.
Yeah. You're also a teacher.
Right now,
you didn't even mention that you're a professor at Santa Clara.
Yeah, that's not even full time. That's only. I kind of do everything part time. Right now, I'm putting on my geeky academic hat, and I'm going to do some writing. I'm writing a book on Filipino Catholicism.
Oh, right.
One's going to be a small book for the U.S. bishops.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm going to write a more extensive book out right after that. That's going to kind of cover, the history. My audience would be for Filipino Catholics in the United States,
sure.
But then go through all the different. People are always asking me, what are the different Filipino rituals, the Sambangabi, different devotions, all of these different things. But then I'm also writing a book with another priest, Father Simon Kim, on intercultural marriages for Paulist Press. But how, so many marriages today are, I guess, have different cultural backgrounds and ethnicity. So what does a person do when it comes to preparing those couples? What are some theological insights about that?
Yeah. Well, you're busy. You're doing something all the time. It's great, and it's also great to see your success and all the great things you're doing, and your publications coming out and your recordings. So I know we haven't talked in a while, but it's great to catch up with you finally, and great to see you this summer. And I could talk to you for another hour, but we don't have another hour. But we'll definitely have to have you on again when your next recording comes out, Father Ricky.
I would love that. Thanks, Jennifer. Salamat po.
Thank you. Walang anuman, and hope to see you soon and hear you soon. And our guest today has been Father Ricky Manalo, and you've been listening to a recording called Be Still and Know I'm Here, along with Mass of Christ the Inner Light. So if you're interested in that and the score, go to ocp.org. Thanks to Father Ricky Manalo, and thanks to Jake, and listen to Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic Channel, Sirius XM 129. Have a great week.
Son has reached